when we are making decisions about other humans' lives, this has to be high quality. It must be validated, meaning we can explain what's going on. And there is this sense that we can't explain AI. I would argue I can probably explain a deterministic machine learning model and how it made a decision better than I can explain how a human makes it.
Welcome to the tippieeleads podcast. Stories from the University of Iowa's Tippie College of Business that will change the way you work and lead. I'm your host, Nick Westergaard. I teach at Tippie and lead our Story Lab program. This podcast provides another opportunity to share stories from Tippie with our community and beyond. Each season of tippieeleads, we focus on a grand challenge in today's changing world of work. This season, we're looking at artificial intelligence. In our previous episode, we heard from Carl Fulmer and Tippie students about how AI is reshaping daily habits. Today, we're turning our attention to a place where AI is creating big waves, human resources, and hiring. To start, we'll hear from Tippie's Emily Campion, who studies how AI is reshaping personnel selection and HR decision-making. Then we'll hear from a Tippie alum whose own journey through management, HR, and training shows how these shifts affect real career paths. Finally, we'll wrap up with a final tip-e just for you. Ready? Let's get started. Emily Campion is an associate professor of management and entrepreneurship at Tippie, where her research focuses on how organizations hire and develop talent. Her work has explored everything from structured interviews to employee onboarding, and now how artificial intelligence is changing the landscape of hiring. Emily brings unique insight into the promises and perils of using AI in personnel selection and how leaders can prepare for this transformation. We are talking about AI and selection. So I want to start with the basics. When we talk about AI and personnel, what do we actually mean?
Yeah, it can mean a number of different things. You can either look at it from the organizational perspective, which is how we're using these methods, very long history out of data science and computer science, not management, believe it or not, but using these methods to actually help us score candidate material better. So if we all remember being job seekers, if you're a job seeker right now, first of all, shout out to you. I hope you're doing okay. It's really hard to apply for jobs. It's always been hard to apply for jobs. And we request a lot of content from an organizational perspective. We want to know who you are to make the best possible decision, meaning not only, are you well qualified, but do you fit with our organization, our unit? But that's really cumbersome to score. Humans do it often. That's what we spend most of our time doing in HR when it's selection, reviewing resumes, reading letters, and trying to bring this all together in this way, in a systematic way that's fair and we can make structured decisions. But we don't do that well, as amazing as our brains are. I use this example all the time. If you look at a resume at 9 a.m. when you're fresh versus 4 p.m. when you're tired and you want to get home, right? Like, we're going to maybe look at those a little differently. We also come with our own preferences. I'm from the Midwest, and then the times I have lived elsewhere, if I meet someone from the Midwest, I'm like, I automatically like this person. I might not if I was like, I'm from Indiana. Like, if I met them in Indiana, I might not like them. But when I lived in Virginia, I was like, meet someone from Indiana. I just love them because that's my preference. That's who I understand and know. And we carry these with us. There's nothing inherently wrong with those, but they can influence us. So what AI helps us to do is to structure this in a way where we can score everything systematically and fairly.
So you've talked about this being an obvious application for AI. How are organizations already using AI in their hiring processes today?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think the most influential way that we're seeing artificial intelligence being used currently is scoring text-based data. So you take assessments, which everybody hates. I hated them when I was taking them, like when I was in school. We hate them, but actually they're really useful. They are validated. They come with limitations, but so does every procedure, right? Resume can be slanted in one way or the other. Our cover letters, our letters of recommendation are always really positive, right? Like, we're not silly enough to find someone to write us a crappy recommendation. But those are really, really tough to score. So when you're taking an assessment, you get a score at the end. Okay, great. You're in like the top 10th percent. Like, that's great. We know that. We can move on with that. But how do you qualitatively compare resumes, for example? Well, text analysis lets us do that really well. So you've probably heard the term natural language processing. So that's the use of machine learning to understand text and to score it. Statistically, that means we're taking all of these terms, we're quantifying them meaningfully and entering them into a predictive model. So that's been really the most influential way because it's giving us access to information on people that we haven't always used. And so there's valuable job related information in some things that people write about when they're submitting an application that we don't always look at systematically. And it's that systematic part that really AI offers a benefit on.
So your work really does a good job of breaking down those different uses, whether it's data, whether it's text-based information, assessment, analysis, looking at the overall narrative of resumes, and really kind of weighing, what are the pros and cons here, which I think when it comes to AI and a number of categories is exactly what we're thinking of. So without asking you to recite a table from your research, what are some of the pros and cons
Yeah.
and implications of those various uses?
I love this question so much, Nick, because I think we are very quick to say that it's introducing all these errors. And although it can, let's not mince words. Like, absolutely, when we are making decisions about other humans' lives, we have to have, this has to be high quality. It must be validated, meaning we can explain what's going on. And there is this sense that we can't explain AI. I would argue I can probably explain a deterministic machine learning model and how it made a decision better than I can explain how a human makes a decision. That's not to be mean toward humans. Remember, yeah, machine learning is this whole science is trying to replicate how we think, which is great, but we can do it in a more systematic way using these algorithms. And so I think, the pros, I think, again, are, systematic. We're really capturing everything about the candidate instead of leaving things because they're too difficult to score. But of course, the con, I think, is we have to do a better job of communicating that value. A lot of candidates, I hear this all the time, and it's so disheartening because I know for some it is very true. Like, it's just a keyword search, or they're just looking for certain terms in my resume. Now, if you were to think about that critically, and if you were actually doing the hiring, you'd say, well, yeah, there are certain terms that reflect the job. But when candidates feel like we're delegating it to an algorithm and not looking at them as a human, when the implication of the decision is very human. Can I provide for my family, right? Or myself, or in my case, my cats and dog. So it's important. It's really important we infuse it with the human element. And I would argue this actually does a better job of that because we're not outsourcing it entirely, right? We're saying the things we don't score well as humans, we're delegating. And then we're using that information as humans to make the decisions. We should not be delegating the entire decision-making process to an algorithm, at least right now. I can't speak for 10 years. Who knows what even next year is going to look like and what people will come up with. But for now, I think that's the stage we're at. And so the real con, in my opinion, is people not understanding how these work and organizations not doing their duty to communicate how and why it's being used.
I think that's such a good point, and I love the systematic thoughts. It makes me think of the Antonio Damasio quote that humans aren't thinking machines that occasionally feel. We're feeling machines who occasionally think, and that's where an algorithm, a system to point to, is helpful. What are some of the kind of applications in terms of a good division of labor between artificial intelligence and human intelligence in selection?
Oh, that's another fantastic question, Nick. That's why you're the one in charge of this. If you so in my experience, organizations are, what word do I want to use? Where they're able to maximize what AI can offer them while also maximizing what human intelligence can do for them, is where we are outsourcing that systematic scoring of the text. So let's pretend that in a case where you've got a series of employment assessments that are all close-ended, meaning they're scored automatically. It's SJTs or a knowledge test Cool. We have those scores. We then have resume, maybe a cover letter, maybe a work sample or something qualitative that we can systematically score using machine learning. And then we bring those components together. And what we end up doing most of the time is creating sort of tiers, right? So these are the top 30% of folks who scored the best, and collectively, like, we brought everything together, and they're some of our seemingly most qualified individuals. The choice then is among this top 30%, right? We're not going to delegate that. We should go and actively review those materials independently, because if they've done it right, that top 30% represents individuals who not only will be able to perform the job, but will stay. Right? It's not just about performance, but will they perform well, and will they stay with us? And so the depth of that decision-making has to occur by a human. And that means they've got to compare and contrast candidates on their own. And it becomes less about, oh, this person got a point higher, because that's maybe not as meaningful, but really qualitatively looking through those materials of the top performers.
So HR professionals are really kind of navigating this on two fronts. We've been talking about this as an emerging technology that, just like anything, it's like, okay, I've got to play around with this, see how it might work. But the other front is really the legal and ethical landscape emerging here. And because it's a changing landscape, I know you can't say definitively this is 100% what you should go do. But what should HR and business leaders be watching out for when it comes to the evolving landscape around state laws and legal defensibility?
Yeah, that is actually a very fun topic to follow. We had a big
it's fun? I was afraid you'd leave the interview.
No, this is one of my favorite topics. In hindsight, maybe I should have become an employment lawyer. I think it's so fun to think about, regulation, how organizations respond to it or encourage it, and how we as researchers, it's our duty to. We really never take this on as management faculty, but I feel like we should be doing maybe a better job of supporting or informing regulation, because we have the data on all of this. So I think there's a couple practical components, and the first is, under no circumstances should you put any candidate material into an open source model. Like, I love ChatGPT. I use it for everything. We were, even before, Nick, you and I, talking about our separate uses of it. Like, it's fantastic. I use it for all sorts of things. However, I will never, ever put, student material or anything like that in there. There are, of course, cases where that may be appropriate if you have a certain licensing with them through your company. Those sorts of things exist. But in general, we should never be putting that information in there. In terms of sort of the ethics around it, otherwise, I think everything comes down to transparency and explaining the why. We have to be able to explain why we're using these tools for our candidates, because it's their information that's being evaluated. And that's very personal, and that can feel candidates can feel very vulnerable doing that, and intimidated because they don't have power in that situation. I think sometimes organizations forget how much power they have. So I think just being mindful of what would I want or not want as a candidate, and how, in those instances where I might be hesitant, how would I explain to a candidate what we're doing and why? Otherwise, just paying close attention to how things are changing. But it takes a long time for some of these bills to go through. Like, public perception is going to be your biggest metric for now until regulations come through. But those take a long time.
I did take note of the time when an actual human being that I was talking to just said that I enjoy thinking about regulation, which is definitely a first.
Is it really?
So as someone that enjoys thinking about all of this, and from the industry and selection side of things, does your mind ever go over to the other side of the hiring equation, job seekers, candidates, what they might be thinking about based on this as well?
So I'm so glad you said this, because at the beginning of this, I said there's sort of two ways we can think about AI and hiring. And the first is the organization. And we have spoken exclusively about the organization to this point. But the other part of that equation is job seekers. I think job seekers should be using these methods to help them, not to lie, but to help coach them and think through, how am I framing myself in an interview? How am I selling my skills in a way that will be received, right? I think all those years, I graduated college in 2011, and I remember thinking like all the narrative was you have to have your own brand. I was a journalism major. That made me incredibly uncomfortable. I still don't do it well, but I do lecture this. I'm like, you've got to be able to sell your skills and set yourself apart. So we should be using these. Why not use them? Now, you don't want to just write me a cover letter. It's got you have to include your own information in there. I'll give an example if you don't mind, because I think this was so powerful for me listening at a SHRM conference last year in Coralville. The state SHRM conference was here, and I was giving a talk on this, and someone was saying, for years they've been receiving grant applications from farmers across Iowa, and more recently they've started sounding like they're from ChatGPT. And I will say this individual, I think, was really conflicted. They were like, I don't really love it because I feel like I'm not getting a good grasp of the authentic person. But at the same time, like, we sort of get it. So for me, I'm like, this is the best accessibility tool we've had in a long time. How wonderful that we can have these resources to help individuals, frame their grant applications better. That's awesome. But at the same time, you have to make sure that your human voice is in there because they're hiring you, not ChatGPT.
So much of your work around this, I noted, are articles that are by Campion and Campion. And I did my own digging on who the other Campion was. and that's your dad, Michael Campion.
Yeah.
And you have so much passion around this topic, and in your work. How did your work lead back to working with a fairly unique research partner?
Yeah, I love that you brought this up. So if you think I'm passionate, you should hear my dad talk about this. He's been he's the one who got me into this area. I really have him to thank. Yeah, years ago, of saying like, no, Emily, this is the future of what we're doing. We have to understand it. Like, very forward thinking. I have to give him all the credit in the world. He's so brilliant and thinks through. Not only is he a brilliant psychometrician, but he's also someone who just he looks out in the landscape of business and says, here's what I think is happening. And that's because he has a really great touch point with business. He's always engaging with business leaders and trying to help them do things better. So it's fun. What I love is I come from two first-gen kids. Both my parents were first-generation college kids, and they now have their PhDs, both. And both my brother and I have our PhDs. And so it's a real testament to what academia can sort of do for you. And three of us still work in academia, so it's kind of probably a problem, but it's a really good time.
It's the family business.
It is. What I'm most excited about, and I've mentioned this a little bit, is about accessibility. The research that I've been working on with artificial intelligence for so years has been looking at subgroup differences. And so we know there are subgroup differences in selection, especially certain assessments. But we've actually found that we can reduce those subgroup differences in application scores by just including more meaningful job-related information. So think about it like this. We're in Iowa, so I'll use an example of things that don't always appear in our tests, but can appear in our cover letters or our resumes, is like church leadership. Right? So we're in Iowa. There's a lot of churches here. A lot of people are involved in their church communities. And those are the sorts of things that you have opportunity for leadership, for community, for programming, for all these skills that are transferable to organizations. But those don't always come out. And for good reason, because we don't want to accidentally put people in a position where they're disclosing protected classes. But there's still skills there. And so we found that we can actually reduce subgroup differences for both race and gender when we're actually incorporating more information. And so I think this really spins the narrative. That's maybe not the best way to say it. This really challenges the notion that AI inherently is just replicating, certain things that we have, certain subgroup differences that already exist. But instead, it can actually be a tool to help resolve it, which of course complicates things. We like to put things in these boxes and say, this is this, this is this. But AI can be really helpful in combating some of those challenges while still offering equal access. And that's what this is all about. We wanted a playing field for people with the right skills to be in the right job at the right time. So that's my last piece about this that I'm most excited about, is to look more at how we can actually just make sure we are actually getting the right people in the right job at the right time.
Hearing from Emily makes it clear that AI is reshaping one of the most important areas of business: how organizations choose the people who make everything else possible. But what does that look like through the eyes of someone building their own career in HR? To answer that, let's listen to Tippie alum Spencer Stump, who charted his own unique path to a career in HR and training. Spencer shared his story at our Spring 2025 Story Lab Showcase in downtown Iowa City.
When did you know what you wanted to be when you grew up? Have you had that moment yet? When I got to college, I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. I had no idea how to design a career. And as a first-generation student here at the University of Iowa, I'd reached a point for myself and for my family that was uncharted territory. I didn't know what was supposed to come next or how best to prepare for it. Case in point, on my first day of college, I had no idea what to pack for my day, so I packed everything. I had this black Adidas backpack absolutely loaded down with everything you might possibly need. Laptop, textbooks, notebook, pens and pencils for the entire class. And the result of this is this black backpack being about twice my own width. And as my roommate and I walked to our first class together, we're walking from Burge Hall down to the English Philosophy Building. And we're cutting through the Pennicrest, walking down the stairs as we're talking, and I've got what looks like this giant black turtle shell on my back. And as we're talking, I slip and start falling down the stairs. But at this point in my life, I'm at least a little bit athletic and catch myself. Unfortunately, I have so much stuff in my backpack that the weight continues to roll down the stairs and carry me with it. Worse yet, I realized later that during this time when you move into the dorms, you plug in your TV to the cable box and there are a few default channels, one of which is a 24/7 live feed of the Pennicrest. Meaning someone could have watched me fall down the stairs on the way to my first class on my first day of college. So I was off to a great start. But the not knowing for first-gen students goes well beyond what to pack or not pack for class. It also applies to bigger things, like how do you choose a major, or how do you figure out what you want to do with your life? And for me, it was incredibly frustrating because it felt like everyone else around me just knew what they were supposed to do in life. Like they were born with the answer written on their forehead, like doctor, lawyer, dance teacher. It felt like I had missed career day at high school, and now I just had to figure this out on my own. And not to sound immediately old, but back in my day, we didn't have all of these awesome programs and resources for first-gen students on campus. But what I did have were really great instructors. Instructors whose enthusiasm and love for their material made you almost like calculus. Almost. Instructors who helped you realize you didn't have to choose between doing well and doing good in life, that you could do both at the same time. Instructors like Ernest O'Boyle. Ernest O'Boyle taught my individuals, teams, and organizations class during my junior year at Tippie. Now, individuals, teams, and organizations is what Tippie calls their organizational behavior class, which studies what it sounds like, how organizations and the people within them behave. It's kind of a meld between psychology and business. And we studied really cool concepts like how cultures are created and how they manifest in daily life, and how teams form and what makes them perform or not perform so well. And Ernest had us do these really cool activities and assignments like dissecting an episode of Kitchen Nightmares to learn about the dark triad of personality traits like narcissism. And I was in love. Not with Ernest. He's a great guy, just not my type. But I kept bugging him about this material because I was just fascinated. So I'd bug him after class and say, tell me more about this or help me understand this concept. And after like the sixth time of me annoying him after class, he's like, Spence, what's your GPA? And I was a little surprised, but I had a pretty good GPA, so I told him. And he goes, have you ever thought about becoming an academic? And I was stunned. It was like a moment in a video game where you're just playing and you accidentally press a hidden button and it announces, new area unlocked. I had never considered anything like that before. I thought that was reserved for smart people, not kids like me from a small town in Iowa of 1,300 people where most of my graduating class didn't even go to a 4-year school. And I thought college professors were like, I don't know, made in labs somewhere and then trucked into campus every semester. I don't know if that's the case now. I don't even remember the rest of that conversation. I just remember leaving the classroom in a daze and wondering if maybe my ladder went a little bit higher than I thought it did. But what most people don't realize is that, especially at a Research One university like the University of Iowa, for a lot of college professors, teaching is just part of the job. A lot of the job is conducting research, is creating new knowledge, which sounds awesome until you realize that means creating research papers. You know those really annoying, dense things that we all hate reading? They get to make those, and sometimes it takes years. So that was a hard pass for me. And instead, when I graduated, I transitioned into the exciting and intrepid world of HR. More specifically, I got into the training and development area of HR, which I contend is the fun part of HR, which I know is an oxymoron. But the idea of maybe teaching in college one day, of being a college instructor, never fully left my mind. And as luck would have it, later on, a friend of mine would reach out to ask if I wanted to teach for this new program on campus called the First Gen Hawks program. And it's designed for students like me, first gen students, to hopefully make better college transitions. I nervously said yes, and in fall of 2020, I got to teach my first class. Now, this is height of the pandemic, so we are one of the few few classes that are actually on campus. And we're in the ground floor of the Pomerantz Career Center. We're masked up, spread 6 feet apart. You remember the great times. But I was there, and I was doing it. And in retrospect, I was terrible. I thought telling was teaching. I had no idea how to build a classroom community, and I loved it anyway. Each week I felt like I levitated out of the class. I enjoyed it so much. It was like I had this big flashing light in front of me saying, do more of this. You like this. You're good at it. And so I did. And I've spent the last 5 years getting a lot better at this because I know now that I want to do this for a really long time. I want to design lessons that my students remember for years after they graduate and leave Iowa City. I want to own a small piece of their memory forever. More importantly, I want to help students that were like me, first-gen students, make a better college transition. Pack a few less things in their book bags and look for those flashing light moments where they realize, yeah, I think this is what I want to be when I grow up. Thank you.
That was Spencer Stump, live at our Spring 2025 Story Lab showcase in downtown Iowa City. As you heard, Spencer discovered HR and training while studying management at Tippie. He's since earned his MBA, works at the University of Iowa Center for Advancement, and develops programming for first-gen students. You can watch the video of Spencer's story and other Tippie storytellers via the link in this week's show notes. Let's go back to Emily Campion one last time for a final tip E for you to remember in your work.
I know this whole series is about AI, and I think you're going to get a lot of people who are AI optimists. But I would just continue encouraging, especially decision makers, to try and continue finding ways that they can use this to better their decisions of who to hire, but also decisions on policies you currently have. So I was just speaking with someone via email at a larger company who was saying they were using text analysis, so natural language processing, to better understand their compensation benefit packages, right? Like things that we wouldn't always think of how we can use it to better understand what our employees need. So I think it just continue prototyping and continue figuring out ways that it can help you do your job better without giving away personal identifying information.
Emily's research makes it clear that AI is changing how we hire, develop, and support people. And that means leaders need to be intentional about how they adopt these tools. In our next episode, we'll continue our look at AI with Patrick Johans, Tippie professor and author of a new book on using AI responsibly. Pat will help us explore how leaders can strike a balance between innovation and responsibility. This episode of Tippie Leads was written and produced by me, Nick Westergaard, with special thanks to Emily Campion and Spencer Stump. To learn more about our faculty guests, their research, and more, go to tippie.uiowa.edu/tippie-leads. If you like this episode, share it with a friend or coworker, or better yet, subscribe to the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you like to listen. And if you're feeling generous, consider leaving us a rating or review to help others find the show. This is Nick Westergaard signing off. On behalf of everyone at Tippie, thanks for listening, and go Hawks!
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Hennica Watkins-Porter hosts The Entrepreneurial You, empowering entrepreneurs with insights on leadership, business, and success. Hennica, tell listeners what to expect from your show.
So we provide innovative business strategies and practical solutions to common entrepreneurial challenges.
And where can people subscribe?
Find us at hennicawatkinsporter.com, as well as the Marketing Podcast Network at marketingpodcast.net, or search for it wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe.